This podcast contains content that is graphic in nature and mature language that may be unsuitable for children or young listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Previously on Sin Law, Taxi from Hell Part 1, we covered the case of Justin Bluxom, a 12-year-old who was lured into a taxi cab sexual encounter with what he thought was a 14-year-old girl, Amber, and Brian Horn was actually a 34-year-old man behind those text messages and enticed our victim, Justin, into leaving the safety of his best friend, Dustin's house to get into a cab, by which he was never seen again. His body was later recovered on the side of a highway not far from the friend's house. They quickly zeroed in on the suspect, Brian Horn, due to multiple witnesses and police interaction the morning of. He was subsequently booked and charged with first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping, and he was taken to trial 4 years after the murder, where he was found guilty and sentenced to death for first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping. When we last left you, I told everyone that he had filed an appeal in 2018. They granted him a new trial by reversing his conviction and sentence, and we'll get into that now.
And then this asshole let you guys just sit for a week.
It was only a week. Only.
Mm-hmm. And you say, what about your episodes when you're watching something?
I get very aggravated. I usually wait until the second...
What do you mean there's not another one?
I usually wait till the second one comes out. With my podcast specifically, I wait till the second episode comes out to finish the first one, or to even listen to the first one, because I want to listen to them back to back.
And yet somebody...
Yeah, but I couldn't, in good conscience, try to get this into an hour or even an hour and change. There was no way I could shove all of the information that I have left yet to tell everyone. So, keeping all of that in mind, we're going to jump...
A likely story.
We're going to jump right back in where we left off with Brian being found guilty, submitting his appeal to the Circuit Court of Louisiana, and what they found was interesting. So, basically, what they came back with, after Horn sat on death row in Angola for, 4 years? Yeah, about 4 years, the Supreme Court overturned his conviction, or the Circuit Court. I'm not sure. Let me fact check that. Hang on. It actually was the Supreme Court, because usually it only gets to the third, or whichever district that they're being tried in, but this one went to the Supreme Court, and they overturned his conviction. So now, after 4 years in jail and sitting on death row, he gets a new trial. And that is because of ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, we've talked about this before on other episodes, because most all appeals in some form are going to include that as a reason for
either
an
ineffective
appeal.
assistance of counsel or / a timing issue of some sort.
Yeah, basically. So either they didn't wait long enough to let the jury come back and decide something, or they didn't, yeah.
I've seen multiple where it was, you didn't give me the requisite 1 day between this and that. And
Right.
I didn't even know all that was necessary.
Yes, we'll get into that in a second, because I actually have that in my notes. So the reason for this reversal stemmed directly back to defense counsel in the first trial. So his counsel, if you remember, was J. Antonio Florence. He conceded that Brian Horn had murdered Justin. He said that in court many times over. He repeated it, okay, we know he killed him, he's not a good guy, but he didn't do it on purpose. It was a heat of the moment. He was trying, basically what he was trying to do, which is a great strategy for a defense attorney, he's trying to keep him from getting the death sentence. He's trying to keep,
if at all possible, to keep the first degree
exactly
out and keep it in a heated moment, rage kill for a second degree.
Right, second degree murder.
Not having the extenuating factors.
Right, exactly. The aggravating factors, yes. Same word, same thing. Good sum up there, summation. So, because he did this, and because they had actual motions that Horn filed in his first trial that explicitly stated that he did not want to plead guilty in any form. And that he had made requests to change his counsel. And then there was even a quote from the appeal that I'll read for you, or you can read if you'd like. This is a quote that his defense counsel, Florence, actually asked the court in February of 2013 during one of his pretrial hearings. And this was his question to the court. Kyler, if you want to read from right there. It's not a big paragraph.
I have one question for you. Perhaps you're not the right person. Perhaps I need to ask somebody in Baton Rouge. I read his pro se motion and it was denied. One of the things he said in there is that I didn't want to use his defense in the guilt phase. I did not want to use the defense he wants to use in the guilt phase. Now, am I supposed to do what I think is best as an attorney for my client? Or am I supposed to be a puppet and do exactly what he wants me to do on these appointed cases?
And do you know what a pro se motion is?
Yes, but currently it's not coming to mind.
Okay. Pro se is when you file a motion without an attorney, so you're filing pro se.
Okay.
Okay? So basically what that tells us, just in a nutshell, is that Horn went on his own and wrote a motion to the court, and that motion was denied by the court. But one of the things that he said in there was that his lawyer wasn't going to use the defense that Horn himself had presented. And the counsel, who was a public defender, he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do, because in his mind, he was trying to do what he felt was best by his client, but what his client was trying to get him to do would absolutely, in his mind, as an attorney, as a legal professional, he felt that the defense that his client wanted to use would get him to death, would put him with a needle in his arm and be done. And he was asking the court, like, morally, what am I supposed to do? Or legally, what am I supposed to do? Mm-hmm. And the court basically turned around and said, that's not for us. They said, the only thing that I can do is judge, and that's all. And I think this is going to be something that you, as an attorney and the chief public defender, are going to have to sit down and make a tactical decision.
The head villager?
Yeah, basically. And either this court or another reviewing court will make that decision, whether that was the right or wrong decision. So apparently, the Supreme Court ruled that was the wrong decision. Yes. And there was a recent Supreme Court case that had been ruled on that set the standard in a different way than before, that was used in this appeal to say, okay, well, you should have gone with what he wanted, even if what he wanted was probably going to have the outcome that he least desired.
Right.
Because you have to do what your client wants you to do. In the same way that you're allowed to take the stand if you want, you have to do what your client is asking you to do. So that's why he was granted a new trial. And that's what led into all of the news articles that I kept receiving to my phone from my Newsbreak app. Shout out, hey, you can sponsor us. And they gave him another shot, although he did have to wait until 2023, this year, to be able to start that trial. So his appeal was granted and his conviction was overturned in 2018, but he had to wait 5 years to get it back into court and officially to start the trial. Brian Douglas Horn was once again on trial for first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping, and this trial started on June 30th of 2023. So literally 2 weeks ago, this happened.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. As of this recording, this episode I don't think will come out until the end of July, so it'll still be within a month of this happening.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So after jury selection on the 29th, so the trial started on the 30th, the jurors were selected out of Vernon Parish because of the publicity surrounding the case, and the first jury for the first trial was actually selected out of East Baton Rouge. So a 12-person jury and 2 alternates were seated Thursday, the 29th of 2023 in Leesville, which is in Vernon Parish. They were transported to Mansfield, to where the trial would be held, and they were actually housed in Mansfield for the duration of the trial. Brian Horn, who is now 47 years old, was in court with his attorney, which is now different than his first attorney, and the district attorneys are also different. So I believe that the district attorney at this time, because this just happened and is now, is actually Charles Adams. And the two assistant district attorneys that were trying this case would be Lisa Lebrano-Burson and Lee Hall. As they both make appearances in the news articles that I found that covered the most recent trial. So Brian Horn, now 47, he's got his attorney with him, who is now the lead defense attorney is Michael Fiser, Fiser, F-I-S-E-R. And I'm probably just going to call him Michael because I don't know how to say his last name, and we're going to say Hall because that district attorney or assistant district attorney, I don't know correctly how to pronounce his first name. So
it's just a whole bunch of people that we're really not sure how to
but we know how to say Lisa Lebrano-Burson. Why couldn't they make the dude's names easy? Okay, just kidding. All right. So the trial started on Friday, June 30th of 2023, just a few weeks ago as of this recording. And the basis of this trial is when his appeal was successful and the Supreme Court overturned his conviction, he basically got a clean slate. So they can't mention the first trial. They couldn't bring it up to the potential jurors. They have to keep all of that basically as if it never happened, poof, out of existence. So this whole trial had to start over from ground zero. And the evidence stayed mostly the same. And I think I mentioned that before. It didn't change from the first trial. The witnesses were basically the same. They had at least 7 different witnesses, including Dr. Traylor, who we mentioned in the last episode, part 1. And they had the ex-girlfriend, the wife. They had all of the information that we went over in the last episode. And the only thing that I'm going to mention, because I found an article that I believe was written by KTL News, and I'll have that link for those sources in the show notes.
Once again, check the show notes.
Check the show notes. Opening statements and testimony began that Friday, June 30th, and that in the afternoon. The proceedings continued over the weekend, which I thought was interesting. It was the 4th of July weekend, but they went all the way through the weekend. They didn't get off on Saturday or Sunday. They held them all the way through because the district attorney said, we're finishing this shit. We're going to be done. So
over the shit.
Right. So they went through all of the opening statements and testimony and stuff, and closing arguments got underway on Tuesday morning, and that would have been the 4th of July morning, after Horn's defense attorneys announced they were not calling any witnesses in his defense. Now, the assistant district attorney, Lisa Burson, admitted to the jurors that this was a mostly circumstantial case because there were no actual witnesses to the crime itself.
Can I get a witness? Because
the only witness was Justin, and he's no longer alive, and the only other person that was there was Horn. And he, to his credit, if you want to give a criminal credit, he never said anything. He never made any kind of confessions, but if you think about it, he had been in jail multiple times. He had been in prison multiple times already at this point by the time he got arrested in 2010, and he knew the system. He knew how this went, and you could say that he was a seasoned criminal and knew the phrase, I'd like to speak with my attorney. So
I don't know if he was technically a seasoned criminal, but he was definitely a seasoned what do they call him, trustee?
Well, he knew enough to keep his mouth shut, and that was my whole point.
Yeah, I just, seasoned criminal, I feel like wouldn't get caught as many times as he did.
No, that's one mistake they seem to make. That's why they're seasoned criminals, because, they can only be a criminal if they get caught.
That's not at all.
That's exactly how that goes. Okay, moving on. She said, though, that despite the nature of the circumstantial case, which in total was still pretty damning, she said that evidence that was collected in this investigation, specifically the fingerprint on the passenger window of Horn's cab, that and the only other evidence that was found and presented in this case connected only one other person to Justin's death, and that was Brian Douglas Horn. Now, Mrs. Burson is the one who was quoted as saying that Horn was one of the dumbest kidnappers on the face of the earth for running out of gas in his cab while committing a crime. Now, on the defense side, Horn's new attorney for this trial, Michael Fisser, we're just going with Michael, agreed that the case was difficult because it involved the death of a child, and he understood and empathized with that aspect, but he also was quick to say that the prosecution did not even get remotely close to proving first-degree murder. And like Burson, he also pointed out the fact that there was a lack of witnesses to the murder, and he still, as the first lawyer did in Horn's first trial that never happened, quote unquote, he still said that there was no specific intent on Horn's part. So he said,
except for that he was specifically intent on harming Justin.
Right, but his lawyer was saying that he didn't plan any of this. There was no plan to kill Justin, that he simply reacted to the events that unfolded.
Right, didn't plan any of this.
Right.
Because,
he said, and this was the defense now, remember that. He said that Horn was spotted by dozens of people on the side of the highway. He made no effort to conceal himself. He had ample opportunity to get out of the area, but he didn't.
Just because he's a dumbass doesn't mean he didn't have intent.
Right, and I 100% agree with that. And he suggested that Horn ended up with a very confused 12-year-old boy who was upset and fearful.
Yeah, I
because
wonder why.
he lured him into a taxi in the middle of the night under the pretense of being a 14-year-old girl. But Pfizer said that Horn just panicked and that he pushed him against the cab, covered his mouth, and that he realized too late that Justin was dead. So he called, and this is the defense attorney. So this is his job.
Michael?
Michael. Mm-hmm. We're going with Michael. The direct quote was, he called Justin's death a, quote, tragic result of a lot of bad decisions, unquote, an unintentional killing and a tragic accident. But we can't speculate someone into a death sentence. And that was how he closed with the jury. But
so the sitting on and asphyxiating of that's an accidental.
The amount of time that it would take to do that, yeah, sure. It was a tragic accident. No, it was tragic, yes, but it was not an accident. Opinion.
I think that, I think that they're playing off of the fact that most people don't understand just how long it takes for someone to suffocate.
Well,
it's not quick.
I mean, no, but it's not. But you can also, on the other side of that, you can argue that people in situations, time moves differently in stressful situations. So I can almost understand that argument there, where you don't realize how much time has passed and you don't. But I mean,
I can in every situation except for suffocation, actually.
Right, and
because that's one where you have so much time
to stop and to reconsider,
to realize what you're doing,
and to make a conscious decision,
and to understand that you are in fact killing this person.
Yes, and if you continue to do what you're already doing, that you will in fact render them.
Yeah, and that, in addition to the fact that you can, anyone that's ever done, say like judo or karate, something like that, if you go to knock someone out by choking, when you feel them go limp, you know to stop. It's a clear feeling.
Right.
Anything after that is absolute intent.
Right. And that's, a lot of other cases have been argued on that exact same fact. And there have been many cases that I have seen through my years and years and years of true crime listening, watching, and reading, where, prosecutors have argued that the intent was formed during the action and commission of the murder because they had time.
Right, I've heard that.
And the premeditation actually was rendered after they started the attack, but because they continued, and before they were actually dead, they formed that intent to continue and finish killing them. So that was a premeditation.
They made the decision during the process that they were going to kill this person.
Right, which creates premeditation. So, back to where we were at. The defense rested by saying it was a tragic accident. And that didn't really sit well with Hall.
I fucking wonder why.
Who promptly had sharp remarks to come back with. He had another opportunity to review the state's evidence for the jurors, and Hall said that he was astounded by Michael's argument, but contended, that Horn direct quote, was nothing more than a child-raping, molesting, perverted piece of garbage.
Damn.
Unquote. Yes.
That's harsh and true.
Yes. And this assistant DA specifically said that intent to kill can be formed in an instance, adding if Justin's murder wasn't premeditated, then why did Horn even contact Justin at all? Why did he get the phone number from his stepdaughter's friend? Why did he initiate that conversation and then entice him to all of the things?
Why do any of these things if there was no intent or plan to further it?
Right.
Aside from having this 12-year-old come and fuck your wife.
Yeah.
Because that's believable.
Right. The assistant DA also argued, or stated in his closing arguments, that Horn couldn't just let Justin go, quote, because his sexual desserts are right there, unquote. Arguing that even though all of his well-laid plans, so to speak, were ruined because he forgot to put gas in his car, he still couldn't just let it go. He couldn't just
take the eye out,
Elsa. So he told jurors that Horn put one arm around Justin's neck while attempting to molest Justin with the other hand, and that Justin died badly and that he deserves legal vengeance on that. And he turned and he pointed to Brian Horn in the courtroom and he said, "That, I can't say that word." Yeah. So he got pretty upset in reaction to the defense's closing arguments because, I mean, anybody would. But he kind of summed it all up with, and this is, again, a direct quote, "He is filth. He should be condemned for it. He should rot in hell for it." And the district judge, Amy Buford McCartney, took almost 25 minutes to read the required charge for the jury because they have to go over everything that is being charged and what they have to vote on, all of the rules of the jury deliberations. They have to go through everything and basically step by step because, again, especially in this second trial, because they don't want to do this shit again.
If for no other reason than it's expensive.
It is expensive, and we'll get to that a little bit later towards the end because I'm going to throw that in there as a little bit of cherry on top for people who were interested like I was. So it took her 25 minutes to read the instructions. The jury left the courtroom at 11:05 Tuesday morning, and they signaled about 12 minutes later. So it took them half the time that it took the judge to read the instructions to come to a unanimous verdict of
guilty
of first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping. And that was on July 5th, 2023, this year, just earlier this month.
Just barely 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. And because it is mandated by law that they take what I refer to as a cooling off period, because it reminds me a lot of when they set the bail protective orders for domestic abuse offenders. They make them stay in, or Gwen's law. They make them stay in jail for at least 5 days to cool down before they get back out if they've been accused of domestic abuse.
Like a drunk tank.
Right. Emotionally heightened situations, they want to give you time to...
Less that.
Yes. So you find somebody guilty of capital murder before you decide whether they're going to spend their life in jail or be put to death. They want you to take some time to think about it. So that's exactly what happened. And they resumed on Wednesday, July 5th. They started the sentencing phase of the now twice convicted child killer. And they actually took in a lot of testimony. And one of the significant testimonies that I found was the psychologist who testified for the defense. Now, this psychologist never actually interviewed Horn, nor did she ever get a brain scan, but she based her observations on police and court records and the fact that he scored very high on the ACEs study. Have you ever heard of the ACEs study? ACES?
assumed that was how that was spelled.
Well, no, I just mean like
not.
big A, big C, big E.
Well, yeah, I also assumed that because this study. But no, I have not.
Okay, that is what they call the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And the study found a direct link between childhood trauma and adult onset of chronic disease, incarceration, and employment challenges, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
The woe is me, give me a free pass?
Not entirely, but it does show correlations between childhood trauma and other things in your adulthood.
No shit.
That could have probably been avoided had you not been traumatically affected as a child.
Required a whole study?
It did, apparently, and they use it as like a baseline, basically, is how they do that. And apparently, Horn, he tested very high on that scale.
And
so
that's for the first time, that's a bad thing.
Yes.
That
means he had a high trauma,
high likelihood of screwing some people up.
Yeah, or himself
screwing something up.
Just having not the best adult life. Yes. So she testified to that, or he, I'm not actually sure. They all of them.
Whichever.
I'm not sure. I know the psychologist from the first trial was a female, but I can't assume in the second one. I don't know for sure. So they also had people from his life, like his mother came and testified about him. The
real one, or the one that claimed him, or the one that abused him, or the one that raped him, or which one?
His actual mother, his biological mother. And
did she fall under a lot of those categories, anyways?
Probably. The prosecutor actually argued that there was zero evidence that Horn was mentally incapacitated, intoxicated, or impaired at the time that Justin was slain.
Yeah, he just finished driving.
Now, for Justin's family, his mom, his two brothers, he actually had there were 4 siblings. He was the second of 4 children.
I did not realize that at all.
Yeah, so he was the second oldest. One older brother, Tyler, and then the 2 younger brothers. I don't know if it was 2 younger brothers. He had at least one other brother that was younger. And a grandfather, an aunt, and a cousin. They all testified for the prosecution, and Dustin, the friend that he was spending the night at his house, he also testified and took the stand in the sentencing phase. They, the Bloxham family, they recalled how they called the police because Dustin and Tyler thought that Justin might have gone home and left his overnight bag, and all of the things that we've already been over.
All of the things about the poor baby, and I say that for the first time in a long time, not sarcastically.
Right. They had to continue the sentencing phase hearing, and this jury now has to it's like this whole separate little trial for the sentencing phase in a capital case. They have to decide whether he gets life in prison or if he gets the death penalty, because those are the only 2 options at this point. So
that's what that's what that little 5-day waiting period is for. So the family.
It's not 5. It's a 12-hour period.
Regardless, that's what that time is for.
Right. On July 6th, the jury went out, and this time it took them 45 minutes to decide.
That's what, 4 times as long?
Yeah, pretty much. At least 3. And what do you think they went with this time? Because remember, in the first trial, he was convicted of first-degree murder and he was sentenced to death. What do you think happened this time?
I'm going with repeat.
Yeah, that's exactly right, actually, yeah. They found him guilty of first-degree murder, and they again sentenced him to death. And after...
Guilty is.
That's right. After his sentencing, the Bloxham family were in tears. But again, this is 13 years after they lost their sweet, innocent little brother, baby son, grandson, best friend, all of these things. They've been waiting 13 years, and they've just been dragged back through all of this for the second time. And now they finally, again, have justice. But that's not entirely the end of it. Although they did, after the sentencing, Horn immediately got transferred back to Angola.
They have vengeance, maybe. I don't know if I would call it justice.
Well,
justice implies an equality of outcomes.
The justice that can be served was. That's all I can say on that.
Understand.
The fullest extent of the justice that we can give them.
I understand.
There is no closure ever, because I can't imagine losing a baby and ever being able to say that I have closure. But they returned Horn back to death row at Angola, and the only really shitty part about all of this...
Only?
the second trial and the guilty and the death sentence. All of those things happened the first time. But since those technically are now negated and poof out of existence, so are his appeals. So he gets a brand new set of all of the appeals that he could possibly file for now this conviction. Barring all that in mind, and I'll absolutely have an update case at some point in the future. If anything crazy happens, and even if it doesn't, I'll throw it in at the beginning of another episode just to let everybody know if his appeals were granted or denied. Something. We'll let you know for sure. Now, this is the part of the episode where I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to tell you real quick.
Did you have a specific part for that? I thought that was just the whole episode.
No. This one's the interesting kind of random knowledge facts that I can give you. I spoke about it earlier when we were talking about how expensive a capital court case is. So, in reference to cost, this is going to be in reference to the first capital murder trial back in 2010. So inflation adjusts a little bit, shouldn't be like terribly a lot more. But I found an article written by Vicki Wellborn, and in this article she broke down exactly how much Brian Horne's capital murder trial cost in 2010. My guess would not have been anywhere close. I probably wouldn't have even come within $10,000 of this total. I don't know.
I was ballparking it at 100.
Yeah. The total for his trial was $105,000 and change. It was like 105,209. So the assorted expenses such as meals, hotels, security, travel, and expert witnesses,
and the field trip,
it came to over $100,000, and that's all taxpayer money, guys. So I can't even imagine how much money would have gone into this second one now. It's crazy. That just absolutely blows my mind. And just a quick couple numbers for you, because this article is a lot. And if you want to read all of the, I want to say rantings, I don't want to put her down in any way, but she was more on the negative outlook of how much money they spent on this trial, specifically because of the extra or maybe like frivolous spending that was being done, and specifically in regards to what the jurors were eating and drinking, which included alcoholic beverages.
Oh, no.
So...
Yeah, if I was on a jury for a capital case, I would want some alcohol, too.
Well, that's what I thought. But when I got to reading this article, it was actually more to do with the fact that they had transferred this jury pool, remember, was from East Baton Rouge Parish. And so the law and the way it was interpreted by the judge and the DAs and everybody, and the police jury, which is the people who cut the checks for the trials and things like that, they said if drinking is something that these jurors would normally do, then we agree to pay a certain amount. I think the limit was no more than 2 a day. And that was pretty easy to keep in check, because apparently in DeSoto there was only like one sit-down restaurant where alcohol could be purchased, and jurors ate there 3 times.
And I honestly find that to be pretty fair.
I think that's really fair, honestly, yes, because you're already putting people, and they were sequestered, so they were outside of their normal home for the length of the trial. But in this article, it also mentioned that one dinner at the El Potrillo Mexican restaurant in Shreveport, the bill totaled almost $700, including margaritas, Michelob, quesadillas, and fajitas.
For how many people?
12.
12 jurors, and just the 12 jurors?
I don't know for sure. It doesn't mention that.
If we do that math, 12 into 700 is, what, like $60 a person?
Yeah.
Ish.
Paragraph down says the alcoholic purchases listed on restaurant receipts totaled $234. Okay, compare that to the $68 spent at Walmart and Market Basket to buy coffee, creamer, soft drinks, and water.
Huh.
So $234 to the $68 spent at Walmart.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, they also got to do their own crawfish boil. apparently, during this trial, and that was a $565 bill.
Thank you, Louisiana.
All right. Well, you can not have crawfish. The biggest number of a singular cost for that trial that I could find was the hotel accommodations for the jurors, and that totaled almost $40,000 by itself. So a lot of money goes into these capital cases, and I just wanted to throw that in there for you guys as an extra little tidbit of information, because I am, part of our title, or part of the name of our podcast is law. So I do go into like actual LAW law. So
really,
unlike other true crime podcasts, I go a lot more into detail about the actual criminal court justice system side of it, or I try to be a little bit more informative about those things. Now, I'm going to jump over again to the civil suits. Now, the civil cases that were brought by Justin's mother, Amy, she brought those back before the first trial ever even started. She initiated a wrongful death lawsuit and a survival action suit. Now, she had multiple defendants, including, obviously, Brian.
Are you going to explain what those are? Because
Yes.
I can...
Wrongful death.
Yeah, that one's pretty self-explanatory. I've never heard of the...
Survival action. It just means that they are impacted by as victims also.
Okay.
So they are acting as survivors.
Got it.
For the victim. So...
It seemed like an odd way to put it, but I understand that now.
Yeah. So it's pretty simple. Like you said, the wrongful death is pretty self-explanatory. The defendants that she filed against were obviously Horn, and then she filed against the Action Taxi Company, Green Action Taxi, as a company, and then she also filed
On what grounds?
I'm kidding there. Let me finish telling you what defendant she had.
Look, you're the one that wanted me in this thing as a
Let me finish what
unknown.
I know, and this is the only part you don't know anything about. So, Horn Company and the owner of the company personally. She was trying to civilly prosecute the company as a whole, but also hold him personally liable for the wrongful death action. Okay. So, obviously, Horn and the company, those ones...
On what ground?
Okay, I'm getting there.
Get there faster, damn it.
I'm trying. You just let me finish. So, Horn and the company, they were granted, almost,
right.
Because... wrongful death, Horn killed him. Now, the Green Action Taxi Company, they were held responsible because they allowed who they knew to be a registered sex offender, to drive one of their cabs, having that knowledge and not giving due diligence to the fact that they didn't do any research, any background checks, information as to what he was a sexually registered offender for.
I don't feel like that's fair. I mean, how were they to know that he was going to get the contacts off of his stepdaughter's friend's phone and then stalk and...
They didn't. So I'm sorry. She also sued the city of Shreveport. Because you have to, and in that way, because it's the city as a whole, because the city actually...
as much as I feel for this woman, she's reaching.
No, but listen, they licensed him a permit for hire, or able to hire. Like, so they gave him a license to be able to drive a taxi cab, to be hired to drive a taxi or a limo or a bus. They gave him that license, which allowed him to be hired by taxi cab companies, buses, and limo companies. And so those ones were all granted. Now, the one that became really interesting to me was the personal file that she had against the owner of the Green Action Taxicab Company. His name is David McFarland. Now, initially, they issued a summary judgment, and that is a motion that they do prior to any actual trial or anything like that. It's usually presented in one of, like, the status conference is when they come before the judge. And a summary judgment basically just means that the judge found that there was no merit in filing against him personally for the civil suit, and it was dismissed. However, Amy turned around and appealed that. And in the appeal, she argued that he was directly liable because he was the one who interviewed Horn, and he was the one who saw that he was a registered sex offender, and he didn't do any kind of checking to see exactly what his offenses were. Now, initially, when they did the summary judgment, the judge said that he likely could have accomplished the same goal without being a cab driver, which is true.
Absolutely.
And Horn was not a direct employee of the owner. He was a direct employee of the company. But the owner was the one who had direct employment.
Yeah, with the owner doing the employment hiring interview, it makes a little more sense.
Right.
But I still think that that's a massive stretch.
Right. So, in the 2015 rehearing, the judges in that hearing said...
If she's able to get it, good on her, because that takes some legal work.
Just wait a second, listen. So, the judges in the 2015 rehearing of the civil case against the owner, David McFarland, they stated that having a taxi allowed for unchecked mobility, which allowed him to set the stage and ultimately lure the victim. Basically, they were stating that a taxi cab in our society is known as safe and dependable, and the owner made no effort to find out why he was a registered sex offender. He alone had the control to keep someone dangerous from driving one of the taxis in the company. And there was actually a quote that said, quote, "He was a rolling, roving risk at all times," unquote.
That's nice.
And they also made mention of the fact that this case is the exception, not the rule. So they reversed the summary judgment to send it back down to the trial court. Although in that rehearing, 2 of the judges dissented from that decision. So they didn't agree with that, but it still won majority vote to get remanded back to the trial court. And then when they went back and did the trial court, they actually held the owner responsible for an undisclosed amount of money. Now, the city of Shreveport also settled, or they were charged an undisclosed amount of money because they issued the for-hire permit for him to become a driver. And this is the most crazy part of all of my research. As I was looking for the amounts of the settlements...
That's a claim right there.
Yes, because I was looking specifically for any kind of monetary value, because I know in most of the time in civil cases, especially against companies or large corporations, they're not going to tell you how much money they ended up having to either settle for or pay. Right. They just don't give the public that information.
They don't letting you know.
So I'm doing some digging.
Shocking.
And I happened across an article that made me... My jaw literally dropped. Okay? So it also made sense as to the nonchalance of the hiring process when the registered sex offender status didn't set off that big of a red flag. Here's what I found. In July of 2021, David McFarland, the owner of the Green Action Taxicab Company, was found guilty of second-degree rape. He was charged with first degree, but he was found guilty of second degree after a trial. He had assaulted a woman after he went out to a tavern in Bossier City, and there were only, I think, 2 of the bartenders left. She went back to the stock room. He came in behind her, grabbed her by her shoulders, threw her down on the ground, and assaulted her. So they found him guilty. And he was sentenced to 18 years, and he had to serve at least 2 without benefits before he could have anything. So basically, they sentenced him to 2 years before he could be eligible for parole. Or before he could go before it.
God, I hate rape sentencing.
Well, it's, yeah, and that's one thing. I honestly believe that needs to be a thing. But he is a inmate currently, as of this recording, at
it's only been 2 years.
Right, but he's still alive. Sometimes they don't make it that long. He's a inmate at the Baton Rouge Department of Corrections, and that it just completely blew my mind. But it made that last little click of like, why didn't they care? You know what I mean? Like, why wasn't being a registered sex offender more concerning? Meh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense. He was a sexual predator himself, so it didn't and this is the first thing that popped into my head, and I'm sorry, I don't even know why I'm apologizing, fucking predators, but the first thing that popped in my mind was like, oh yeah, she was asking for it. That had to have been why. Like that kind of bullshit mindset that, only predators can have. So, the Green Action Taxicab Company, as I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone, it's no longer in business. My guess was from back when she filed the civil suits when the company was held liable. Even though I couldn't find the dollar amount, I'm sure it didn't go over well. So now let's end on a whatever level of positive note that we can get to. And this is going to be talking about, again, Miss Amy Fletcher, the mother of Justin Bloxham. She has been an advocate and, gone really hard at state governments and she did successfully get past Justin's law. And it was actually, he was tragically murdered in March of 2010. They passed Justin's law in May of that same year.
Good on you.
Right. She fought hard. And, I go mama. That's all. I don't know what else to say because she's an amazing woman. She's done a lot in this area specifically. Now,
if nothing else, a lot of paperwork.
Right. So Justin's law specifically tightened the laws around violent child sex offenders, keeping them from attaining jobs that would put them in the reach of and easily accessing potential child victims. This law was adapted into Louisiana. Also, it was later adapted into Texas and Oklahoma state legislature.
Nice.
So it specifically states in Louisiana that a registered sex offender, and I think it's blanket, I don't think it specifies violent or nonviolent, but sex offenders are not allowed to be hired to drive a taxi, a bus, or a limo. Horn is currently 47 and will remain on death row until such a time as he exhausts all his appeals, which he now has the run of the gamut again, because the other ones don't count for this new conviction. But barring any nominal errors the second time around, he will stay on death row until he either dies of natural causes or he is executed by the state.
Natural causes could be prison riots. It's been known to happen. And
when it comes to pass, again, we'll let you guys know. And then just one last quick fact for you guys. There have only been 28... I
can't tell you how many times I've heard that.
There have only been 28 people executed in the state of Louisiana since 1976. The last one was Gerald Bordelon in 2010, which I thought was kind of creepy.
Bordelon.
He was executed in 2010, and Brian Horn committed this murder in 2010. And Bordelon was sentenced to death for kidnapping and murdering his 12-year-old stepdaughter, Courtney LeBlanc. And I just had to go back and delete what Kyler just said because he was trying to give away the entire future episode that I already have planned to cover Gerald Bordelon's... the whole thing, yeah. Because it's a really, really, really fun fact. Yeah.
You have a very skewed sense of fun.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I do. I'm not going to disagree with that. And I don't know about fun as much as find interesting, but whatever. We all have our hobbies, okay? At least I'm not sewing together like skins of other people and trying to wear them as a coat.
I mean, it'd be warm.
No.
Yes, it would.
Anyway, we plan on covering...
Coats are very warm.
We plan on covering the Gerald Bordelon case at some point in the future, so that's all we're going to say about that. And this is where the case of Brian Douglas Horn and the murder of Justin Bloxham, and that's where it stands as of now. So, I hope you guys enjoyed listening. I hope I didn't bore you too much with all of the legality and the side ventures and the different stories. It was such a tangled, crazy web of things, including the taxi cab owner ending up being convicted of rape.
Oh, absolutely. Let's be honest, guys. If you weren't here for side ventures and legality, you knew you picked the wrong one already.
Right, but I try to keep everything tight, keep it all to where it is cohesive. Like they all had things to do with the other things, right?
Yeah, that's how rabbit holes begin.
Right, yeah. So the spiderweb, rabbit hole.
And next time in Wonderland.
But you guys are here, you're listening, hopefully you're still listening. You guys actually get 3 episodes back to back to back because this is a 2-parter. So next week on Monday again, you'll have a new episode, but it's not going to be over the same stuff. It'll be different. I think we're actually traveling back in time for that one. So, oh yeah, I've been pretty.
We have that technology?
I'm pretty sure it's the one you bailed on, but we'll get there. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for coming back every week or every other week to listen to the stories that we have to tell that aren't even ours. But
and just like they say in AA, just keep coming back.
I don't know if we want our podcast to be associated with an addiction rehabilitation, but we'll go with it.
That's just because we don't want them rehabilitated. We want them to continue their addiction to us.
Oh, we want them addicted.
To us.
Okay, got it. All right, well.
So keep coming back.
Thank you again. All of my sources are in the show notes for both episodes.
So once again, check the show notes,
guys.
Check
the show notes. There's also resources down there for any kind of crises you or someone you know might be having. Check those out in the episode show notes below. There is also...
that crisis has to do with...
me. There's also a little button down there. It's a link that says support the show. If you click on that, you can help us out. And you can also get a shout out on the next episode. And that just shows us some love. At some point in the future, we absolutely will be having bonus episodes that'll only be available through a subscription or through a donation. And those will be...
So she says.
Fun and outrageous.
It depends on how many subscribers we get. She really wants to put out a couple of these bonus episodes. The bloopers one are going to be great.
The bloopers will be absolutely wonderful. But I also think that... there have been a couple mentions of cases and things in these episodes that Kyler had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. Very well-known cases that I would love to be able to talk about.
Quote-unquote, very well-known.
Oh, keep coming back. Shh.
And we're back.
Will you please?
No.
If you guys could just give us a review on Apple Podcast, and if you subscribe, it'll actually tell you that our episodes have been released. I know that it'll do that on Apple Podcasts. I don't know about the other platforms, but if you do click the subscribe button, it'll allow you to get alerts if you want alerts. That way you know when our new episode's released, because we are kind of on a weird 2-part, you're welcome, weeks back-to-back schedule. So just keep that in mind.
Just turn your notifications on.
And
it's worth it.
We will see you guys next week. Or I will.
Sometime.
Take care out there.
This has been an Elf Audio production.